This here brings back old memories. We used to be in H2 down yonder, and every day what would have happened was we'd have been walked up here, 30, 40 of us, by your screw guard, your guards. You'd have walked up here and they'd come up by the football pitches and up into the VTC, the vocational training. In there wasn't menial work, it was something to learn to trade at. You would have got your City and Guilds or one of these particular when they pick their certificates. And one of them there was a motor vehicle body repair, another one was welding, and another one was electrics. So when we got up here, we were put in there, we went to our various hut, and what happened was then that gate was locked behind you. The various screws sat in there. You'd have went from maybe 9 to 12 or half 11. You'd done a bit of work. In my particular case, it was a case of rubbing down cars, filling them up with eyes upon and such, and sanding them all down, spraying them. And in that particular hut, it had an oven and that helped to bake the paint dry. You got an extra pint of milk a day. You got the extra pint of milk was because of the fumes with the like of the spray. Although you were all well masked up and such, but that was one of the things you got, so you could have walked back that night in an extra pint of milk, which, although believe it or not, it was a luxury. It was a luxury. Especially in a place where you hadn't got a fried egg along in many a day. An extra pint of milk was a luxury. In the electronics place, that was fixing washing machines, tumble dryers, stuff like twin tubs, stuff like that there. And in the welding, it was welding this, that, you know, they're just the ordinary, they get you used to doing the electric arc welding. 3 tradesmen, they were most, in the joinery, sorry, there was a joinery one in well, that's why you have 1, 2, 3, 4. They were screws, but they were called trade screws. And in actual fact, the one who done the motor vehicle body repair, the man was in charge of all these, had worked with a man who used to be my foreman away in 1972 when I left school, when I was doing mechanical engineering, serving my time. And the problem with the mechanical engineering, just to go off on a bit of a tangent, the problem was with the mechanical engineering, when you got out of prison with the trade, I had a trade mechanical engineering, that's why I went for the motor vehicle body repair. When I got out of prison, there was not a big lot of places that I could have applied for jobs for, because you must understand, in that particular climate, in that particular era, mechanical engineering was based all around the Lake of Shorts, Harlan Wolff, Mackey's, which was basically Protestant orientated and Protestant run. You know, so once you were an ex-prisoner or had a record, to coin a phrase, you weren't welcome. So basically what I had to do when I came out of jail, although I was trained before I went in, done that wee bit in here, I had to go and learn another trade for further any career or any money-making ventures that I needed to do. But the VTC, as I said, you weren't doing menial tasks. It was something that you could have enjoyed. And if you had a stayed, every year you'd done a test to get a certificate. It was like an apprenticeship, although you were a bit older than apprentices. But at the same time, you could have, if you stayed here long enough and went in there and done your 3 years, 4 years, you could have ended up as a qualified, whatever it may be, engineer and such. In later years, after the blanket protest, VTC was one of the bargaining tools, if that's the right word, or one of the accepting terms that prisoners would have used rather than doing menial. With the no work, with part of the blanket protest, this here was classed as educational because it was beneficial to the individual, rather than you can stand there and sew mailbags, make jumpers, make trousers, all that rubbish, mass produce all your life, and you're still going to be going out there 2 hands of one line. Where at least in the like of these places here, you could have went out and furthered your life's ambition. But a good thing was that we all enjoyed was the walk from H2 on to H1, which are both down there. Unfortunately, I think they're on their way out now. They're getting knocked down now, which is a shame. Walked the whole way up. You didn't march in single file. You marched in walked in an orderly fashion. You had your guards with you, a couple of screws, whatever it may be, and marched in here. You also had, at that time there, you had 5 or 6 or 8. These here were slightly better looking gardens, if that's our landscaping. and you had like a landscaping squad who would have been out here, and you had one screw with them, and they would have been looking after. They seemed to have a wee bit more freedom. We were put in, locked in a cage, as you see what it is. They had the bit of a freedom with one guard. Well and good, that was up to them. That was the screws doing, because they were actually well-known loyalists. That's just the way things went. We were contented in there. As I say, the football pitch was there and the gym was behind it. The gym, as you know yourself, is a 2-storey building, but there's no windows in it. But I'll tell you a wee funny story about in this VTC. We were all in one day, and it was a good day, something like this. And as I say, there was a lot of old cars, washed up old cars. There was no engines in them, because the mechanics of it wasn't what we were in there for. It was the body repair was all to do with what this was aimed for. And we were out one day, and the car was there. It must have been just in, but it had its 4 wheels. So I jumped in, and the boys started, it was dinner time or break time or something, and the boys started pushing us round the cage. As you see, you could have went right round at this stage there. I see it partitioned off slightly there now, but you could have went. So the boys were pushing and pushing, and I was in it laughing and turning the wheel and this, that and the other, and as you know, with 3 or 4 behind you gain momentum, you gain momentum. Well, I got to sort of 10 yards away from the wire or the fence, put my foot in the brake, which of course there was no brake. Straight into the fence. Didn't do a big lot of damage, as you see, there's a wee concrete plinth there around it. But that was my claim to fame. I crashed the car in Kesh. Not many can say it, but I did. But it was just an old scrapper and nothing happened. There was no big deal. It wasn't a hanging offence. But, you know, we weren't, you may guess, none of us were in the car again after it. It was put on out of the road, and that was the end of the hijinks. That's the right word for it. But I didn't mind my time in there. As I say, the actual instructor we had was a fairly easygoing sort of fella, sort of person that you don't mind dealing with. As I say, everybody has their own idiosyncrasies, but personally with him he was all right. What he done was, he done his job. He'd learned you. If you wanted to learn, he would have helped you. He had a nice way with him. He didn't torture you, he didn't come down as you better do, or I'm putting you on report and this, that and the other, which a lot of them sometimes did. But he was, to me, he was fair, and you can't ask much more than that there. The guy was in to do his job, he done his job, and I wish to God I could have stayed there longer, because eventually I got shifted into McGilligan along with a couple of hundred others one time. And that was the end of the VTC, because they didn't have it up there. All they had was the huts, all right, but it was menial tasks, making shoes or something. But in there was, I can always say, if you'd have stayed there long enough, you would have learned something. You know, and hopefully maybe through the years, some people have come out with certificates, or city and guilds, and went on to further themselves in the outside world, because as we all know, it's hard enough for ex-prisoners when they get out there. So the more they have, you know, the better for them, the more chance they have. But again, even now when I finished it, the good thing was that you finished at sort of 12 o'clock, you walk back down again, you got your lunch in the black, you got locked up, you were out again at 2, you're back up here, 2:15, 2:20, in again, you're finishing at 4, back down again. But we done what a lot of people didn't do then. We got a nice wee walk and a nice wee dander about, and especially if it was a day like this, you know, it was enjoyable. Some old wet, damp, dank days, but it was still out. And that was the most important thing to us, it was out. And then an odd time there, you might have been lucky, you might have seen a prisoner or two coming out of these blocks. And what would have happened then was you'd have passed them. They might have been going 3, 4, 5, and then it might have been down to 6, but you might have passed them as you went along. There was another kettle of fish. When you first get sentenced, you went into one of the wings in H8 over here, what they call the committal wing. And when you get brought into the reception in the cache in here, you either blanket, or you didn't go on the blanket. If you didn't go on the blanket, you were brought up to the committal wing in here, where they more or less assessed you. And assessing means that it really depended how much you done, or how much whack you were doing. Normally, the rule of thumb it was now, and it wasn't written in stone, but basically the lifers, the 20-year men, were nearly always put into H7. The 10 to 15-year men were normally put in. The 15 to 20-year men then 10 into H8, and then you had the lower ones, say from 4 up, were put into 1 and 2. Rule of thumb, as I say, it wasn't written in stone. But in that particular wing over here in 8, what they done was they had the regimental running of the jail. You know, make a bed pack first thing in the morning, you're locked up, let out, first thing locked up at the right time. You know, everything was all very strict and controlled. It was as if this was going to learn, this is the way this jail was run. Now, unfortunately, I don't know where the screws were living in this particular wing, but when you got an ordinary block, the wings run themselves without coming down on you hard, slobbering, locking you up, putting you on report and stuff. In the like of H8, you'd have been put on report for not making a bed pack, you'd have been put on report for lying in your bed over the lockup where you should have been sitting up. You're not allowed to do this. When you go to the other wings, these are all formalities, nobody bothered like that there. But what they seen when they put you into this particular wing, I'm nearly sure it was C wing and H8. I'm nearly sure, don't quote me, I'm nearly sure. What they done was they had individuals in there, and they knew that they could have manipulated them because you were only there for the 28 days. And there wasn't enough time there was a big turnover of men in it. There wasn't enough time for people to jail to become a unit. So they were able to manipulate things in such a way that they could have had that wee bit more control. When you went to the other blocks, you know, you had your camaraderie, you had your friends, and you had everybody sticking together. So that was just a wee story here to hit it. You know, just now to just see it there beside here. Another thing was you used to have sports days in these football pitches where you had maybe H8 of a football team, H7, H2, 1, 2, which were actually conforming blocks at the time, as they called conforming blocks. Now, just because you weren't on the blanket didn't mean to say you were conforming and you loved the system. What it just meant was a lot of people, everybody's an individual. A lot of people can go on the blanket, a lot of people can't. Just because you can't doesn't mean to say you're a bad person. Just because you did doesn't mean to say you're a good person. Fair play to the boys who stuck it, but there was other guys there as well who's done things outside and have credibility, who just, their makeup couldn't handle it. And that's not saying one's right and one's wrong, just saying everybody's an individual. So you've seen a lot of different people, high profile people, all in the like of H8, H7, H1, H2. But on certain time of the year you'd have had this sports day, as I say, you had the football teams. Of course they were mixed. But you found that H7 would have normally won the tournament every year because it was mostly in there, it was loyalist, because a lot of the lifers, long-termers of the Republican side would have been on the blanket or on the protest because they were losing nothing because of the sentences they were doing. They would have been the best footballers, they would have won it 9 times out of 10. You know, what they used to do was try and get you as like a sports day for to go over and cheer the people, cheer the matches on. The problem was then they used to say, right, I'll meet such and such or such and such will be there. But what they done was they segregated it. So as all the supporters out of H8 who went would have been in one bit, but they wouldn't have been in contact with anybody out of H1, H2, vice versa. Another thing was that in the times of, when I was in 1 and 2, there was a case, it was once a week you'd maybe get out to the gym or to the football pitch. Especially this time of year, you'd get out at night to the football pitch for a match. And I remember a time, the first time I was out, or the second time I was out, and I wasn't too fit, which I used to be fit, and I ended up I wasn't fit. We were only getting into the regime, was starting to run about the yards, which I'll explain to you when we get to the blocks. is that they were playing football and the ball come up, 50-50 ball, and I went up to hit it. And I hit the ball all right, but I also hit the other fella's head. And I gave him 9 stitches in his head. And that was my first experience of the football pitches. But the PTO came along with it, came in, and there the fella was pouring my blood. It was a complete accident. It wasn't, fortunately we were of different persuasions, but that was neither here nor there. It was just a complete accident. But we would have went out at night there and played a wee match, or the referee, the PTO would have been, the physical instructor would have been, he would have been refereeing the match and done everything by the book, And that was another nice wee thing to get out of the black, especially weather like this. Weather like this was a godsend, because it gave you an opportunity. Regarding the gym, as you'll see, it's a 2-story building, but there is no windows on it. But when you go in on the top story, and the second story of it, that's where all the weightlifting equipment was. And the bottom floor was where you could have played basketball, five-a-sides, any volleyball, stuff like that there. Again, you got out there, I would say, maybe once a week. Once a week, maybe. Sometimes maybe one day and then maybe one night, weather like this. When it got inclement weather, you'd have probably only got out there once. Sometimes good days like this, instead of taking you to the gym, they'd have took you in there. There was PTOs there all about. People to take you to the gym, people to show you the weights, circuit training if you wished, and play basketball or anything like that. Irish games were forbidden. There was no such thing. You couldn't go out there and say, right, come on, we'll go and play a bit of Gaelic instead of soccer. That was a no-no. That was a no-no. And everything had to be English, British, non-Irish orientated. You couldn't have lifted a stick and started hitting the ball with it. It's classed as hurling. But there was 2 pitches here. But mostly when you came to go on the pitch, walking, what they done was to put you in the van. This was nearly the only time that you walked anywhere that I found. Everything else was in a van. If we wanted to go to the visits, in a van. Or black, in a van. You're going to the gym, in a van. You're going to the pitches, in a van. But yet they were willing to walk us up every day into the VTC. And as I say, you were that close to hit 7, which as we all know now was where the big escape came in 1984. But there could have been 200 people in there and you wouldn't have seen one on. Might have been lucky seeing somebody in the back of a van. You might have been going to a visit. An odd time you seen somebody walking. An odd, very, very, very odd time. That was the only time. The only real time you seen anybody walking to the visits was coming from 3, 4, 5 and 6, where they walked the blanket men and the protesters. Hail, rain, snow, sunshine, sleet, anything. They walked them from them blocks to the visits and walked them back again. We didn't. When we were on these blocks, what happened was you were bussed. To me, that looked very immature. That looked very full of badness, sort of thing. I suppose they had their reasons. I can see no other reasons, only trying to break them. That's 2 sides against each other. That's another story. But when you're driving by in a van and you see some of these fellas walking, lank, dank hair, in this prison garb, walking, grey, pallor, walking along, soaked, hunched, knowing what they're going through, and the screw stand beside him with his big top coat and his big hat on him, well hopped up, walking them to visit. It's no joke. It's a real wee walk right round. And they got them and soaked. It was just, to me, it was pettiness, and it was no wonder that people didn't take being in here as being rehabilitated, because they found controversy and they found obstacles in their way at every turn. Well, again, I have to go back to here. The fella who looked at the screw that looked after me seemed a fair enough fella. But then again, he must have treated that as a 9-to-5 job. Some of the other ones were going to their two wee clubs in here and going in for night duty and this, that and the other. He seemed to me 9-to-5 job, as if he was just working in an ordinary place. But as I say, there may be, I would say 30 in each of them huts. So there was all us, maybe 40 in each of the huts coming up every day. It was comical to see us all daddling up here, this secure prison, and nobody can move without this and move without that. And there was this horde, if that's the right word, or trail, daddling up here every day. But again, I can only say it was a plus. I can only say it was a plus. I just want to have a wee look in here, if that's all right, just to see what she is like. You could have went right round here at one stage. This looks like the welding room. Because of the bays, you'd have had your welding equipment and you'd have went into each bay. And then you'd have had a few benches. Somebody would have chipped the stuff off if you hadn't have done it right. Again, up here was where your screw sat and watched everything. This was your ordinary day-to-day screw. These here, as I say, the benches sitting here. This would have been his office. You had like a tea hut. See, there would have been your equipment sitting up there. And every day when you take anything out, he would have checked to make sure everything was there before you walked out the door. He would have knew straight away without counting anything, if that wasn't filled, your stuff wasn't there. There's example, the hammer. If that hammer wasn't there, he knew right away. These would all have been files. These would have been your wee chipping hammers. There's your rules. There's your wee cards. Loyalist inmates, A level. There's the name. The names of them. GCSE, this is what I'm saying to you about learning. And education. Again, everything looks so small. Well, this is the old VTC building we used to work in, Monday to Friday. Vocational Training Centre, and this one was a motor vehicle body repair shop. This was something that I enjoyed, as I'd done a bit of it when I was outside. I was serving my time. Excuse me. But in here, what we used to do was we used to have old motors, and they were dented and bashed up, and our job in here was to build them all out again, ease upon them, sand them all down, and then respray them. And then to my left here, it was actually an oven where you went in, you pulled the shutters down, you pulled the plastic things across, and you put your mask on, you made your cellulose thinners, and you spray, and away you went. Now, it was trial and error for a lot of people, mostly myself as well, were runs and different stuff like that, or blotches. But that was all part of the course. What you done then, you take it out when it dried, give it all a rub down and started the process all again. This was to give you good training, which it did do instead by me in later life. But this was, in here, that was the oven. And also part of this thing was the extra pint of milk a day, which was an always good bonus. Toilets, the wee staff room, the screws room, and basically you used to sit over this way here and you'd have done your theory. In the morning sometimes you sat, you'd done all your theory work where there was a projector, and you sat, you took all sorts of notes, wrote all the work down, and then in the afternoon you carried out supposedly what you learned that morning, which is basically in here. You had benches here as well, where vases where you made different wee mechanical objects, what you did when you were serving your time as a fitter or a mechanical engineer. A lot of filing, a lot of drilling, a lot of sanding. But this is what all this was for. You had all your tools. Again, every tool had to be signed out of the tool shop there and then put back. It meant then everything was checked, double checked, travel checked before you walked out this door. Screw was constantly walking up and down, in and out, round the place. I remember the time it was a delegation of the government of some description. They were bringing somebody in to show them how great. It was the time towards the end of the hunger strikes when they were trying to tell the world how great this place was and how the hunger strikers were just killing themselves for no reason, and this was the most modern jail in Europe. And there was a lot of Republican prisoners in here at the time, from no fault of their own. They were in here working. Remember, this was like an educational work. This was not menial tasks. You were getting something out of this. This was later to become part of the education facility that was used in later years after 81, sorry. And what happened is then the screw came to us, the teacher came to us, and we went to the teacher and says, look, we don't want to be in this documentary, we don't want to be on TV, we don't want to be seen as if we're promoting Long Kesh. And that's what it would have seemed. If they had come in and seen us all working away, whistling like the Seven Dwarfs, all ha 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 and he he, which it was not, we were in prison. And there was a lot of things happening in the different parts of the jail that was deep, deep, deep in our hearts that we never forgot about. And what we done was we told the screw that we went into the wee room over here, in the far room, and closed the door. All the Republican prisoners, there's maybe 20 in here, 20 people in here. I would say 12 of them, maybe 14, about 12 of them were Republicans. And what happened was Republican socialists, what you want to call them. And what happened was we went in there, closed the door, just like yourself, a cameraman. What had happened was he would have turned around, followed us, or followed in here. Look at this great job, all smashing oven, top of the range. Look at this projector, top of the range. Look at all these people working away happily. This is a great jail. This is a modern jail. And it was the loyalists who worked away. It was no material to them because a hunger strike and the blanket had no real significance to them. They weren't part of it, and they had a film about 6 people. When they went away, then we would have come out and continued on our work. But it was just like a propaganda from the government's end, which propaganda on all ends. But this was to show that the blanket blocks, 3, 4 and 5, 6, whatever it may be, was a case of they're doing it themselves. Look at all the facilities we have for them. Because remember, this is only one of 4. This was the motor vehicle body repair, you had the welding, you had the electrical engineering, and you had the joinery. So you had 4 units here where people could have learned their trade. There's other units about the place there that made trousers or shoes or jumpers. All menial tasks. We've been for 20 years. You're never going to become out a tailor. You're just going to turn around and be just what you were. And this is what the old adage was for years ago, before political status, sewing mailbags. Like, what good did that really do anybody for rehabilitation? But that's another story. But in here, to us was, even though at that time a lot of people were in the blanket and a lot of people weren't, to us, this was still our wee part of not doing prison work. And this, as I say, this was more an educational facility for us. We were learning all the time. And as I say, at night we were able to go home with books, which we were doing with the oral. So it was just like doing school, or just going to a technical college outside. In the morning you'd done your theory, and in the afternoon you'd done your practical. And then at the end of the year, what you'd done was you sat like an exam called the City and Guilds, which is like your first year apprenticeship, second year, third year, fourth year. Although we're a lot older than apprentices, it's still that give us that, if we finished the course in here, we would be able to go out and apply for a job because we would have the necessary certificates. This was the one good thing about in here. It was one of the better places to work. I was lucky enough to be in it. Wasn't that many in it, but compared to the whole jail, but I was very lucky to be in it. Again, it was just the cage out here. There was just the old cars there, and then how did they get them in? Now to think of it, they must have. I don't remember how they got them in. I think that door was wider. Got them in, rolled them in there. But there was a lot of booting and banging and hammering, but I can just see it now with the bright light shining. It was roasting in there, roasting. It actually baked the paint onto the car.